If everything in you still vibrates with the name of someone who disappeared, this video is a direct message from the universe to your soul. Some people disappear, but they don't vanish from within us. They leave silently, without explanation, without goodbye. And what remains is an echo, an absence that screams in the chest, and a question that won't be silenced. Why? If you're here, you probably feel that silence wasn't just an end. It was an interlude, a blank chapter before the next page. But why do soulmates break contact like this, so intensely and inexplicably? Was it just fear? Was it ego? Was it cowardice? Or could it be a deeper movement, spiritual, karmic, necessary for the true reunion to happen? In this video, we're going to dive into this mystery with depth, courage, and spiritual connection. We'll understand what really happens when two souls that recognized each other drift apart in silence. And at the end of this journey, perhaps you'll see that silence wasn't a punishment, but a preparation. If you feel that this message is for you, go ahead and leave your like right now. Subscribe to the channel and share this video with someone who is also feeling this emptiness. Because today, your soul will hear what the heart has always known. You wake up every day with an invisible presence by your side. Even if the bed is empty, even if the phone has gone silent, even if no one else speaks that person's name, something inside you remains alive, as if the story hadn't ended, as if the absence didn't truly mean absence, as if the silence weren't the end, but the harbinger of something greater. And yet, the pain exists. Because when a soulmate disappears, it's not just the other person who leaves. It's as if a part of you also retreats, as if something inside you remained suspended, frozen in time, waiting for something that even you can no longer explain. Have you ever wondered why this happened? Have you tried to understand what you did wrong? Did you ask yourself if it was your intensity that scared them away? If it was your love that weighed too much? Or if perhaps you were deceived by something that only you felt? Many people try to rationalize this kind of rupture. They say, move on. Those who disappear don't deserve you. Or, if they left, it's because they never loved you. But you know it's not that simple, because there was something different, something that transcended the body, desire, the ordinary. It was a connection without words. It was a mutual recognition. It was as if you had known each other for millennia, even if you had just met. So why does such a deep connection break so abruptly? Why did the one who looked you in the eyes as if seeing your soul simply disappear, without closure, without explanation, without warning? This kind of distance leaves an existential void, not just from longing, but from the breaking of something that seemed eternal. And this makes you doubt yourself. It gives the feeling that you were abandoned by fate, as if you had dreamed alone. But what few understand, and what your soul is beginning to sense, is that certain separations are not just emotional, they are spiritual. There are bonds that need to be tested in absence. There are souls that need to get lost before they find each other again. And there are silences that speak more than any word. This video is not about romantic illusions. It's not about feeding empty hopes. It's about spiritual truth. It's about understanding that the rupture between soulmates is not random. It's not neglect. It's part of a much deeper, older, more sacred cycle than the ego can comprehend. And you, who stayed, who feels, who cries silently, need to know you are not alone. Many who have awakened to this spiritual connection have also gone through the same abyss, and what seemed like an end, over time, revealed itself to be just a stage. Maybe you are still caught between the past and the future, trying to decipher the signs, waiting for a message that doesn't come, or trying to convince yourself that you need to forget to move on. But the soul doesn't forget, and what is true doesn't die. It just changes form until it's ready to return. Today, we will cross this silence together. We will understand what it really means, and why, for soulmates, distance is often the shortest path to true reunion. Because sometimes, what seems like a disappearance is just the universe saying, it's not time yet. When a soulmate disappears without explanation, the mind collapses, trying to find logic where there is none. You replay all the conversations, you review the old messages, you look for signs that you may have ignored. You keep trying to find the exact point where things went wrong, as if that would be enough to understand what cannot be explained with reason. But the silence that settles between soulmates is not just absence. It's an energetic field. It's a space of transformation. On the spiritual plane, often, the pain of separation is a call to evolution. What you feel as abandonment, the universe hears as an invitation to surrender. Because before truly uniting, two soulmates need to undergo a deep cleansing. They need to face their own mirrors. They need to strip away illusions, fears, emotional dependencies, inherited patterns. And it is precisely at this point that the ego comes into conflict with the soul's purpose. The ego wants control. It wants answers. It wants guarantees. It wants immediate, constant, predictable love. But the love of soulmates does not obey the logic of the world. It follows the laws of the soul, which are often uncomfortable, unpredictable, and profoundly transformative. That's why the meeting between soulmates, although intense and magical, often awakens the deepest traumas of each one. It's as if the other brings to the surface everything that was hidden, dormant, denied. And not everyone is ready to handle that intensity. Often, the one who disappears is the one who felt the most. But what they felt was so overwhelming, so out of control, so deep, that they simply didn't know how to sustain it. They ran away not out of contempt, but out of desperation. Not for lack of love, but for not knowing how to deal with their own transformation. And in the meantime, you who stayed feel everything. The emptiness, the absence, the pain of not having been chosen. But what you don't see is that, in the spiritual backstage, this silence is polishing something much greater. There are meetings that come to awaken, and the awakening, as beautiful as it may be, is violent. It's like waking from a long sleep in the midst of a storm. Nothing makes sense at first. The ground disappears, identity dissolves, and the soul enters a process of purification. In that moment, you are not being punished. You are being prepared. The universe did not take that connection from you. It gave you a sacred space to grow. And what seemed like the end begins to reveal its true nature, a crossing. It's in this phase that illusions fall. You realize that love is not possession, that the other is not responsible for your happiness, that there is no happily ever after if there isn't first a real encounter with yourself. And even with all this pain, something inside you continues to feel the presence of the other soul, as if they are still there, somewhere beyond time. And they are. The physical breakup does not mean an energetic breakup. You remain connected. But now, each one needs to take care of their part. Each one needs to face their own ghosts. The soul that has gone needs silence to find itself. And the soul that remains needs to learn to embrace the emptiness without losing itself. The pain of separation is often the portal to rebirth. It's there, in solitude, that the deepest call echoes. Not so you can chase after the other, but so you can chase after yourself. This is the hidden secret behind the silence of soulmates. It is not rejection. It is alchemy. It is the invisible fire that burns everything that is not real. It is the necessary darkness for you to see again with the eyes of the soul. It is the pause between chaos and reunion, the silence between the last chord and the next song. And when you understand this, something changes. You stop asking for answers, and you begin to listen. Because deep down, the soul knows. It always knew. This separation is just a stretch of the path, and the reunion does not begin with the return of the other. It begins with your awakening. After the storm of the breakup, after the noise of the mind, after the despair of seeking answers that do not come, there is a moment when the soul finally tires of fighting, not because it has given up, but because it understands that brute force does not open spiritual doors. It is at this moment that the healing process begins, when you surrender. Surrender is not giving up. It is not letting go of the love you feel, nor denying the importance of what you lived. It is recognizing that there is a greater flow guiding events. It is stopping swimming against the current and allowing the river of life to follow its course. Often, it is precisely the silence of the other soul that creates in you the opportunity to listen to what was once muffled by the noise of attachment, anxiety, expectation. It is in this retreat that you begin to perceive the great lesson hidden in the separation. True reunion never happens outside before it happens inside. There is no point in waiting for someone's return if you have not yet returned to yourself. There is no point in wishing for the other's presence if you have not yet learned to inhabit your own presence. When two souls connect deeply, all imbalance comes to the surface. If you place the responsibility of saving you, completing you, validating you on the other, that energy ends up pushing you apart instead of bringing you closer. Because the soulmate did not come to fill a void, but to show where that void exists, and only you can take care of it. Healing begins when you accept to look at the silence without fear, when you understand that being alone is not being abandoned, but being in front of yourself. It is when you allow your heart to rest in the emptiness without needing to fill it with distractions, illusions, or temporary people. It is in this space that the spirit works. It is there that your energy begins to rebalance. The separation is like a retreat imposed by life, a forced withdrawal that deep down is a blessing. It is in it that you learn to hear your own voice, to recognize your true needs, to differentiate love from attachment, desire from dependence, passion from spiritual connection. It is in it that you discover that, even without the other, you remain whole. And this wholeness is not coldness, it is not indifference, it is not closing yourself off to love. On the contrary, it is opening yourself up to greater love, the love that is not limited to the bond with a single person, but that expands to life, to the universe, to yourself. It is the love that returns your dignity, peace, sovereignty. And when you access this space, everything changes. The longing continues, but it ceases to be a prison. The waiting continues, but it ceases to be despair. The silence continues, but it ceases to be torture. You understand that each absence has a purpose, that each interval holds a revelation, that each distance contains a lesson. Spiritual wisdom manifests when you realize that reunion does not depend solely on human desire. It depends on the maturity of the soul. It depends on the ability of both to sustain the energy of a union that is not common, that is not superficial, that is not merely romantic, but profoundly transformative. And until that maturity is reached, separation is protection. Protection against wounds that have not yet healed. Protection against patterns that still need to be broken. Protection against the rush of the ego, which could destroy what the soul so desires to preserve. Therefore, instead of resisting, allow yourself to embrace. The silence did not come to destroy you. It came to rebuild you. It came to take from you everything that is illusion, everything that is excess, everything that does not align with true love. It came to clear the ground so that when the seed of reunion germinates, it finds fertile soil, not a heart in ruins. Healing is therefore the path of patience. It is the exercise of trust. It is the reminder that the universe knows the exact timing of things. And even if the ego insists on rushing ahead, the soul learns to rest in the divine rhythm. When you reach this state, something extraordinary happens. Despair gives way to serenity. Need transforms into self-love. The fear of losing turns into gratitude for what has already been lived. And in this process, you begin to realize that the most awaited reunion is not with another person, but with your own higher self. This is the true preparation. Healing within, reconnecting in silence, learning to trust the invisible. This is how the soul becomes ready. This is how the heart stops asking and simply begins to be. And it is in this state that the reunion, if it is the divine will, happens naturally. But even if it does not happen as the ego imagines, what has already awakened in you is never lost. Because the love that soulmates awaken is not a common feeling. It is a calling. It is a reminder of who you are, where you came from, and where you are going. And for this reason, the silence that now hurts is the same silence that, further along, will give you peace. There is a moment on the path of soulmates when the pain of separation stops being just pain. Gradually, it becomes a mirror. The suffering, which once seemed a punishment, reveals itself as a teacher. It is when you realize that this whole process never aimed to destroy you, but to lead you back to who you truly are. This moment is subtle, but transformative. It is when the heart, tired of fighting against what it cannot change, finally opens to the truth. It is when the soul understands that it has not been rejected, but summoned to a much more important reunion, the reunion with itself. The higher self begins to manifest when you recognize that you are not just a person who loves another. You are a consciousness that experiences love as a means of expansion. You are not an incomplete being searching for the missing half. You are whole, and the meeting with the soulmate is just a reminder of that. This perception changes everything. The emptiness that once seemed unbearable transforms into fertile space. The longing that once weighed like a prison becomes an impulse for growth. The silence that once hurt becomes a channel to hear the inner voice. You cease to be a hostage of the other's absence and become the guardian of your own presence. And in this awakening, something magical happens. The energy changes. You begin to emit a different frequency, more serene, more stable, more magnetic. Because true power does not arise from the desire to control another, but from the sovereignty of one who has found themselves. The higher self is that part of you that does not live in lack, that does not feed on fear, that does not need external validation to exist. It is your divine spark, your immutable essence, your deepest truth. And when you begin to live from this place, love ceases to be dependence and becomes an expression of fullness. This does not mean that love for the soulmate disappears. On the contrary, it purifies. It ceases to be a bond marked by anxiety, by the need for possession, or by the agonizing weight, and becomes a lighter, freer, more mature connection. You understand that to love is not to bind. To love is to allow each one to be who they need to be, even if that implies distance. It is at this point that spiritual magnetism blossoms. The more you return to yourself, the more your energy becomes irresistible. Not because you're trying to attract the other soul back, but because you resonate in authenticity. The true reunion only happens in this state, when both, each in their own time, return to the center of themselves. And if destiny prepares the return, it will be at this new level of consciousness. No longer two beings trying to complete each other through lack, but two whole souls choosing to walk together out of affinity and true love. This is the greater purpose of the connection of soulmates. Not desperate attachment, but the reminder that love was never a prison. It has always been freedom. However, even if the physical reunion does not happen as your mind wishes, you do not come away empty-handed. Because the greatest reunion has already occurred, you with yourself. And when this happens, nothing can be lost. Love transforms, expands, dissolves into everything you are. The personal power that arises from this is not arrogance. It is not about controlling destinies or manipulating energies. It is about inhabiting your own light. It is about trusting the flow of life without needing to force it. It is about looking back and thanking the silence that hurt so much, because it was the one that led you to a place that no words could ever reach. Spiritual sovereignty is this state in which you understand that everything has purpose, that each separation prepares a reunion, whether with another or with yourself, that each absence holds a lesson, that each emptiness is in fact a portal. And then you discover that you were never alone, because the soulmate may have distanced themselves in the physical plane, but the connection remains in the subtle plane, and the higher self, once awakened, never goes back to sleep. At this point, you no longer beg for answers. You are no longer attached to what was. You no longer lose yourself in fantasies. You simply are. And in this being, in this state of presence and authenticity, love manifests naturally. What once was pain becomes strength. What was once longing becomes expansion. What was once silence becomes music. This is the miracle of awakening, discovering that loss was never loss, but a call to the greatest gain of all, the remembrance of who you are. And so, after traversing the pain of separation, the silence of absence, the confrontation with one's own fears, and the discovery of the power that arises from within the soul, a truth is revealed. Nothing you lived was in vain. The distance was not a punishment, but a preparation. The silence was not empty, but a portal. The absence was not abandonment, but protection. What seemed like an end was merely the necessary interlude between a version of yourself that was still seeking in others what was lacking within, and the new version that learned to reconnect with its own essence. The reunion with the soulmate may come, yes, but now you know that the true reunion has already happened. You return to yourself, and it is in this state of wholeness, in this awakened consciousness, that everything gains new meaning. If life brings back that love, it will be lived with maturity and fullness. If it does not, you will have gained something even greater, the certainty that love is never lost, only transformed, because love is the very essence of the soul. Therefore, keep this truth in your heart. Distance does not destroy what is true. Silence does not erase what is eternal. And the soul that is your companion on this journey will sooner or later find its way back, one way or another, even if it is within you. If this message resonated with you, subscribe to the channel and share this video with someone who needs to hear this today. And I want you to tell me in the comments, what was the greatest lesson that the silence of this connection has brought to your life? Your sharing can illuminate the path for another person. And never forget, sometimes the universe separates us for a time, just so we can reunite at the right moment with a mature soul ready to live what it could not before.